And welcome back to the show. Well, with schools gearing up for resuming in-person learning this fall, many individuals actually believe that children or expecting children to be mentally capable of focusing on their education after dealing with the trauma of COVID-19 and with urban life experiences is really going to be somewhat challenging. Now, in response, our next guest partner with celebrated publicist turned mental health professional Stephanie Carnegie, introducing New York City Training and Comprehension Act of Trauma in Children Act. And joining us to share more details is District 21 New York State Senator Kevin Parker. And Senator Parker, good to have you back, brother.
So how you doing? I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
I'm good. You know, last time we talked, we were trying to navigate ourselves through this pandemic, and we were in a far worse condition. Now we see ourselves really making some progress, but yet and still, while we made some progress on the other side, there's still a lot to look ahead to. And I know that you want to tackle the issue of really looking at kids going back to school and the challenges that they can face.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, we have this pandemic that has threatened both our lives and our livelihoods. But the ways it's threatened our lives has been visibly, but also invisibly. And so you've had people who've had physical symptoms, and we spent a lot of time dealing with that, and not nearly as much time looking at the mental health impact of COVID, of stay-at-home orders, right? Of the fear, the anxiety of people losing their jobs, being food insecure. Some people, because of the stay-at-home order, were in fact trapped in with their abusers, right? Both children and family members, right? And so as we come out of the physical part of it, we really need to be more keenly aware of what's happening with people's mental health. And we're seeing that kind of breakdown all over the place, particularly in young Black children whose rate of suicide has skyrocketed since the pandemic.
We talk about Black children and suicide, but also talk to me about PTSD, right? You have a lot of families across New York City that actually lost loved ones during this time. And going back to school, of course, we all have to go back to school, but going back to school with this on their mind, definitely another layer in their educational challenges.
Yeah, part of what you're reaching in that conversation is really a breakdown of the whole support system, right? You have children who are in crisis right now from a trauma perspective. They usually lean on their parents, but their parents are in bad shape too, because they've lost their jobs. They've been sometimes sick. Many of these families have lost their major breadwinner. And so they're, again, not just feeling anxious about whether they're going to get the virus or not, or be sick from that, but then also, how am I going to pay my bills? How are we going to pay the rent? The person who's been providing for us is now gone. Or you just lost, your wife and you're just grieving over that. And so we really just need a kind of comprehensive way to deal with this. And a first step in this was a bill that I've introduced with the help of Stephanie Carnegie that really addresses the issue of trauma in children in our public schools. And so the legislation proposes to put a trauma care expert in every single school, one in every single district, and then a task force to overlook the issue of trauma and make recommendations for the entire city of New York.
What have you been hearing about it since it's been introduced? Because obviously that would be very helpful, but we understand that we're dealing with government and everybody doesn't see the same way that you see.
Yeah, the legislative process is slow, if nothing else, right? There's 213 members of the legislature, 150 in the assembly, 63 of us in the Senate, and then also we have to get the governor to buy in. And so I've been raising the alarm about this. There's been a lot of other folks. In fact, my colleague in the Bronx, Jamal Bailey, has been talking about this a great deal as well. But this idea of trauma-informed care in our communities, but particularly in our schools, really has to be job one as we talk about reopening schools. As you know, I'm running for city controller, and so I've talked about this a lot of not just investing in Wall Street, but investing in our schools and investing in Main Street, and making sure that we reduce class, even look at adding 2 teachers per classroom to deal with the lag between that some students have, to expand school-based athletics, but also expand music, art, and athletics and dance as regular parts of the curriculum in our schools. But we need to, now that we have universal pre-K, need to go to universal after school, not just for homework help and step team and basketball, but really the Beacon School model that Jeff Canada made popular with the Harlem Children's Zone, and really add components for parents, right? At these schools that are being, essentially run fallow at night should be opened up. There should be public-private partnerships and we should create a place for parents to get job training, for them to get actual jobs, and maybe even family counseling. But we really understand that children operate better when parents are in the building, even if it's not their own parent.
Yeah. What are you hearing with boots on the ground in your area about people really being on their feet after COVID? Now, when I say after, I'm using the term very loosely,
Yeah.
because we're very much still in it, but we're way out of it.
Right.
But talk to us about what are you hearing with boots on the ground about families in your area and those concerns, because some people are unemployed, some people have suffered loss, some people have owned businesses have had to close or look at struggling to reopen.
Right. So again, we've always said this, right? When white folks catch a cold, Black communities catch pneumonia, right? And that's certainly the case with COVID. And so even though the state of New York is now open, many businesses are opening, the pandemic is still here with us. And the pandemic economy, unfortunately, is still here with us. We've had almost a double the rate of loss of small businesses that the white community has had. And that's had a seriously detrimental effect on our earning potential in the community. We have an economy that's moved from Wall Street to Main Street. Amazon is not coming to save us. And so we really have to save ourselves in this moment. And so really, again, I've been proposing building small businesses because, again, that's where Blacks, Latinos, Asians, and women work. And so we really need to create full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits, because you're exactly right. Part of what's adding to the mental health stress is the lack of security that people are feeling now, both about their health, but also around the economy, food insecurity, and safety in our community, because crime is way up in our communities as well.
Yeah. Are you a little concerned about what's going on in terms of the potential for increased homelessness, particularly in Black and brown communities? I mean, we've got that moratorium that the governor's got, but that soon will be over with. And when that's over with, the eviction process is going to continue. I've heard that your area can be one that can be strongly affected by those with the housing crisis.
Yeah, homelessness is a citywide issue and certainly a crisis. And we've certainly hit even a new high with that, in the context of the pandemic. And certainly one of the problems that happened is that as the governor instructed hospitals to find new beds, what many of them did unadvisedly was to empty out their psych wards and create new COVID beds in their psych wards. And so they took people who were seeking help and put them literally on the street. We have not fully process those folks back into facilities in which they can get the kind of around-the-clock care that many of them need. And so we really need to work significantly at that. But let me just belay people's fears that here in the state of New York, we are covered by both a federal moratorium on evictions, but also a statewide moratorium on eviction that go through the end of the year. And I, as the chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, have passed a utilities moratorium to make sure that your water, gas, electricity, telephone, cable, and internet can't get cut off for the next 18 months if you've been affected by COVID. So there are some protections for people in the immediate, but I think that time will go very, very fast. And that's why I think that it's such an emergency that we continue to work with our community to create full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits. Again, as the chair of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, I think that the clean energy economy is going to be one of those places that we need to do that work at. And again, as a controller candidate, I've talked about how I would use the pension fund to build out the clean energy economy and build those businesses that are working in that area to produce these jobs, particularly for Black and Latino communities.
Yeah. I got you. We've had this conversation talking about mental health. We talked about suicide. We talked about our community as a whole and the challenges that have been faced within inner city communities. When we talk about really life and quality of life, everybody wants to have a better quality of life. If you're elected, talk to us about what would be one of your priorities when you talk about dealing with these quality of life issues.
Yeah. Well, one of them is going to be the issue of police reform. I've been literally the leader in the state Senate on the issue of police reform. After the murder of George Floyd a year ago, the state of New York was the first state in the entire country to set of legislative reforms. We passed 10 bills, 4 of them were mine, including the 911 false reporting bill, a bill that creates a body cam program for state police, another one that creates an office of police misconduct in the context of the Attorney General's office, and one that reaffirms the right to record police activity. And again, how important was that in the context of the Derek Chauvin trial? And so since then, I've done more. And I think as city controller, one of the things I'd like to do is audit the police department, not because I want to defund the police, but I do believe that we should have an NYPD that serves and protects, but does it with dignity and respect. And so I would do things that I've already been working on, like create a mental health non-police response to issues for people with issues on mental health and homelessness. I would certainly help the state define the notion of excessive use of force. I actually have a bill with the Attorney General, Tish James. We did a press conference 2 weeks ago on this legislation, and we hope that it'll get done before the end of the year. And then also continue to make sure that we are working with our police around training to make sure they have the proper training, and that we continue with a residency program to have people who look like us be in the police department. I think that you get, in this moment, we are essentially signing up to have an occupying force from outside of our city police us. That should not be the way. We should be policing ourselves, and we certainly should be in recruiting people in our own communities to do that. And then I also want to audit HPD, the housing agency, and make sure that, you know, home ownership is a huge thing, again, especially in Black and Latino communities where most of our wealth is in our homes. And deed theft and things like third-party transfers has undermined that. And I think that HPD has not spent enough time focusing on home ownership, and we certainly ought to be trying to transition people out of, for instance, NYCHA into their home ownership. You know, NYCHA was never developed to be generational housing. It was supposed to be temporary housing for people, and we were supposed to be, you know, transitioning. I certainly, as somebody who grew up in NYCHA, in the Bushwick houses, would work not just to make the living conditions there better, but also work with people so that they could elevate their lives.
Yeah, you brought up NYCHA. I was getting ready to go right there because I am a product of NYCHA too, St. Nicholas Projects, and right there in Harlem, 2 blocks behind the Apollo Theater. I tell people all the time, 237 West 127th Street, Apartment 3A. That's my story. But when we talk about NYCHA, definitely another set of challenges, right? And I've talked to people who've had some real concerns, especially in this COVID community, because when we talk about, you know, a densely populated community, there you are, NYCHA houses. When you talk about, you know, lack of things within apartments, a lot of challenges. How do we get that situation better under control?
Yeah, Darren, one of the things that people have to understand is that housing really becomes the foundation of everything else that you're able to do. And NYCHA in particular is too big to fail. There's almost 600,000 people who live in NYCHA. If you look at that in the context of the state of New York, the second largest city in the state of New York is Buffalo. There's only 250,000 people living in Buffalo. So if NYCHA was its own city, it'd be the second largest city by far in the entire state of New York, right? And so it's way too big to fail. We need to pay more attention to it. One of the problems, to be frank, is that we don't own NYCHA. NYCHA is actually owned by the federal government. And I've said for a long time, and I've talked to my colleagues about this, about working towards developing a plan for NYCHA to be turned over to the city of New York so that the city can actually own NYCHA, and so there'd be more of a kind of stated responsibility. And right now, the city of New York is responsible for managing NYCHA, but doesn't have the resources that it needs. And so we certainly have to come up with some better ideas. There's a couple on the drawing board now that deal with a few apartments, but nothing that deals with it, development wide, right? Like every development in every area. And, you know, these buildings now are very, very old. Most of them, you know, 60, 70, 80 years old. And so we really need to put some more resources into them. But again, you know, we want the buildings better, but we also want the quality of life in NYCHA to be better. And really want to work with folks, again, around first-time home owner programs, around entrepreneurship opportunities for people in NYCHA, help them get access to capital, help them get mentorship, help them to get technical assistance that they need to develop their own businesses, and educational opportunities that folks are going to need to work in the industries that already exist in the city of New York, like the fire industries, you know, finance, insurance, real estate, biotech, new media, all of which are going to be expanding now that the stay-at-home order is over and that we're trying to move out of the pandemic economy.
Before I let you go, let me ask you this. How do people continue to support the tactic bill and things that you've got there with that legislation?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, trauma-informed care is absolutely critical. There's nothing more important than our young people. They represent 20% of the population, but 100% of our future. And so people should reach out to me in my state Senate office. They can reach me here at 718-629-6401. Again, that's 718-629-6401. They can email me at parker@nysenate.gov, sorry, parker@nysenate.gov, or go on my website at parker@nysenate. Again, it's parker@nysenate. And, you know, find me online. But certainly we want people to reach out to their members of the legislature, ask them to co-sponsor the legislation and to help push for its passage.
All right, Senator Kevin Parker, we got to leave it there. Thank you, my brother, for being with us here on Open. All righty. Well, I'll let you know, listen, if you want more information, visit his Instagram and Twitter at Senator Parker. We do have more show, I should say. Stay with us. Open will continue coming up right after this.